Okchay Hachamapi. Hello everyone. I'm Isabela Santana, actress, producer at the NGO If Not As In Who, host of this podcast, and Pataxó, indigenous nation of the south of Bahia, northeast of Brazil. This is a very special podcast where we'll be having amazing guest speakers and we'll be talking about how our narratives are connected to the land and how the land is the guardian of our identities. And and I'm here with David from the YUU people. It's an honor to have you here. Let's start our impact storytelling podcast.
Yeah, let's do that. Maya David Hernandez Palmar, Tanulia. My name is David Hernandez Palmar. I'm from the YU peoples from Colombia and Venezuela. I'm a producer, and storyteller, filmmaker, photographer, and I work at If Not As In Who, running the mentorship program with my colleagues, Jay and Isa. And yeah, we are, having this great time of making spaces for younger generations to tell the stories from the tropical forest. For me, it is a good pleasure to do the intro of the first episode of the podcast. It means a lot for our peoples to have our voice of, to be part of the big conversation. There won't be climate justice if our voices are not being heard. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of really great indigenous leaders as guests of this episode. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, exactly. Throughout this podcast, we'll be talking with many indigenous people from all over the world. We are going to explain a little bit about the importance of impact storytelling and how all of this is very strongly related to climate justice and how there's no a way of having climate justice without racial justice. Um, so I've met David 4 years ago at the Imaginative Festival, and since then we've built a very beautiful friendship. And it's been 1 year we've been working together at If Not As Then Who. We work together in the mentorship team. It's a program called Emerging Filmmakers Program, and we have more than 25 mentees from all over the world, mainly Global South. David, tell them a little bit about the program.
So yeah, as Isa mentioned, I met her in Toronto years ago. And she's unforgettable. I mean, I saw this young lady who, runs like a platform, Visibilidad Indígena. I was like, hey, what a cool name, Indigenous Visibility. And what was all that about? Especially you were invited, directly from Imaginative. They don't do that very often. And I was like, wow, she was invited as a special guest to Toronto. So there must be something really great that she's bringing with her. And so when I met you, not only I just confirmed that you had a lot of things to share, but also, like for me, it was really important just to have another relative from Brazil that, we're looking for the same, outcomes. We're sharing the same, um, needs, if that's the correct word, but was more like there were a lot of coincidences, and we started to create a database of film festival and showcases in Brazil, and that's how we started to work previous to get together at Innovating Who. So, and then the adventure started with the mentorship. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, we are celebrating it actually. This is very cool because not every day you have people that, they truly believe you, that have a lot of faith in you, in your work, although the crazy ideas you might have, at the very beginning. And people might not get it at the very moment, but there is intuition there. So I really appreciate that. That, I think that spirit within the team, it is what I think, if not asking who. And yeah, so we designed a mentorship program aimed to have mentees from tropical forest, local indigenous communities who had experiences to share through cinematography. And then Jay Renault, who's a colleague from Scotland, we started to design to think, well, first of all, we had to like go over 300 applications worldwide, and then just to, well, what will be the criteria for us to do the selection. And then it was really clear for us, just to take account regions, tropical forest, global south, and also like initiatives or storytellers and in collectives that they would provide something to the reason why we created the mentorship. And it was really great just to take care of their needs, and we were creating every space and every session based on what the expectations, right? And most of them, they were having issues such as connectivity, or sometimes they were like political issues there in the countries that we're living in. So like protest, or there were some of them that were threatened because of the work they do, so they had just to be low key. So I think that's one thing in common. We all come from communities that we are different bioregions. And yeah, I mean, there is a common struggle, and there is something that we want just to build around communication. And most of them, they're not only being part of the mentorship, and that's something really cool because aside of that thing, they didn't know each other, so they met, for instance, in Guatemala. There was like like gathering of indigenous communicators that work actually with biodiversity, and then when they saw each other in person, they say like, hey, so you are my classmate, at the at the mentorship. So there was something really like incredible and magical around, they getting together. Like, how come if not us and who through the mentorship that put us together, and yet, aside of that, we also gather in other spaces. Yeah, I mean, this is like, a proof like there's a generous magic taking place out there.
Yeah, and it's all about storytelling.
Yes.
And it's this podcast, I think that like by talking to you, I just felt that this is a celebration for us as well of all these years of work individually, and also in this first year of the mentorship as well. So
Yeah, but
it's a
also,
celebration.
I will love to also mention that, the role that you've been playing is really crucial as well. Because you and I, as coordinators, we have a lot of things to get done, through, I mean, inside of the organization. But also you've been, like a key person just to do the follow up, and also like, like just to make sure that people stay in touch with us, and we give feedback, and also like we really appreciate your contributions and ideas. So I think a very important part of the mentorship, not only because you do what you do, but also we rely on your criteria also to make decisions. And that you should talk about how do you feel about that. How do you feel about the mentorship? Like sometimes you wonder like, I'm a producer, but I feel like I'm more than a producer. Yeah, of course you're no more than a producer. But so you as a young indigenous woman, and also like all those things about navigating through three languages in everyday basis, like we navigate through Portuguese, English, Spanish, and then we have to you know that's really great thing. So I would love to ask you, how do you feel about it, and what's your role in the mentorship? How do you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's a responsibility that I embrace with lots and lots of love, and I get really involved. It's really an honor to be having the opportunity to be doing all this stuff at my age, and it's really nice to be here. Like when I sometimes when I'm doing all this stuff, I just think about my grandma. Like most of the things I do today, it was because she fought it a lot back in the days, and then passed this struggle to my dad.
Hmm.
So I that's where I get my all my force and all my strength from. So I feel like a very strong person when I manage to accomplish this work. And yeah, like being like a very special place to me, to be also uh, a place for me to be able to dream and follow also my acting career, and like lots of stuff happening, and and when I do production, it's a way of also being close to cinema, and and yeah, like lots of things. I do lots of things. We all do lots of things, and and by doing this work, I really see that many things are possible, and that we have the right as indigenous people to dream and to try to do many different stuff, because we are made of many different things. Yeah, and I just like try to walk with humility and my my ears open and hearing a lot. I think that's the way I like walking throughout the world. So, Davi, I wanted to start talking about the importance of storytelling by mentioning a little bit of what our leader, Ailton Krenak, which is a very important leader for us in Brazil and for many indigenous people around the world. Um, and Ailton says that we live in a world of war, with war between narratives, because in the world we live in, there are many other words that exist. Not only the Western world, but many indigenous universes exist
Hmm.
within. And he says that we are living a war because the narratives, many narratives are not being heard or conversed between themselves. Um, how do you feel like that is the importance of bringing up our narratives as indigenous peoples?
I think first of all we have to recognize there is a harm out there, in terms of imagery, imagination, and the possibility to think of another world. And you mentioned, that there are a lot of universes, and actually we can take a bit of that universe of our own cultures just to have a say, as I said before, in the big conversation around climate crisis. But also, it is a chance for us to recognize we have solutions, or that we are actually living solutions to combat climate crisis. But what that means in terms of narratives. So I think most of the narratives that are out there that are consented, that are mediated, they are not meant to have us, that is not inclusive. And that's why, and the Alton Karnak contribution to have another alternative narrative from the communities, it is because it doesn't have anything to go with, like hecatombe, or like, the end of the world. So, that, notion of telling a story every time you're, you know, like you are putting away the end of the world. And that's something that brings hope, but also brings the possibility of just people to revitalize their narratives, but also um, to put on the table what are the solutions, what are the knowledge, you know, that can be shared with the rest of the world. And I think it is a chance also to create togetherness, community consciousness, and I like to think of to have more and more and more knowledge and more contributions from other cultures of what is narrative. What the war of narratives it is also to recognize that indigenous peoples have technologies such as harvesting, and that's a key thing for the climate crisis right now. How people's gonna eat, and indigenous peoples, they do provide that through food sovereignty. That may be a very very simple metaphor, but the very end is a key thing for the effects, the effect, what the climate crisis causing to most of the humanity or the human species. Yeah.
And in like practical ways, in which way do you think, which tools can we be using as indigenous people to be telling our stories?
I think we have to recognize that those tools were part of our culture. I'm not saying the camera, but the way we tell stories. Sometimes we call, well, those are the, like the instruments of the master. But then I think we believed that, but at the very end, if you think about it, that was taken away from us. And then we felt like, we don't have the capacity other than, telling, in the always our stories. But then if you think of how people are just taken all over the place by, making films, making fiction, making podcasts or etc., you realize, there is something natural there. That, like, we do that, in a very easy way. Like, well, the only problem is that we're nonstop. We're very, very generous with the words, and yeah. So in a very practical way, I think it's recognizing that for every communicational fruit, if I may say so, um, there is a practice of honoring our ancestors through storytelling. So, any means of communication means also honoring the gift of storytelling.
It reminded me of my dad because my dad is a huge storyteller, and for me, like storytelling is a way of life. That is how we live. That's how we teach. We pass on the teachings by storytelling. We don't like say the exact thing. We usually tell a story to teach something. Going back to Ailton, how do you think that storytelling can postpone the end of the world?
I think, first of all, we are the center of the narrative. These narratives put in the center our families. So every story we can relate to it because, you may feel like that's your mother, that can be your grandmother, that can be your aunt, your uncle, any relative, when you start to break down the narrative. And that's how we feel like, as long as we exist, we were able to tell the stories, and then we're postponing the end of the world because we're telling ourselves who we are, where we come from. So I think that can be nonstop, but that very notion is also compromised by the climate crisis. So I think it's more like putting in a balance. How can we tell stories if our very own land is compromised by climate crisis? So it's something that has to be taken account. And what brings me a lot of hope is what actually Alton says, like by telling stories, by creating the conditions to be a storyteller, we can postpone the end of the world. Yeah, I love to think about that in that way.
There's this writer called Eliane Potiguara. She's one of like the biggest women writer that we indigenous women writer we have. And she says like, I'm nothing. I'm just the granddaughter of Maria de Lourdes. I'm nothing. Like, and she's a huge writer. And the name of my grandma is also Maria de Lourdes. And I say like, I'm nothing. I'm just the granddaughter of Maria de Lourdes. She was a very humble woman, and she had a brown skin, and she was a very strong warrior, a traveler as well, because she got outside of her village at a young age. So she got involved in the 80s national indigenous movement in Brazil. So she's been like the main guide for me in everything I do. That was what I was saying to you, David. Like she's the guide and the responsible for everything I'm doing. And she passed her struggle to my dad, and my dad passed it to me. And it's because of her that my family ended up in the big city. She took us to the city of São Paulo, and then she got back to Bahia. She was born in the extreme south of Bahia. She is the daughter of Casimira, my grand-grandma, a very, very strong woman, very strict with education, very angry.
Very tough.
Yeah, very tough. And yeah, that is our education. We were tough to be tough women, and to keep going and to believe in ourselves. And my people is like this. We've been resisting for more than 500 years. We are people of first contact in Brazil, and we can only be doing that because we are tough. And even though I haven't met my grandmother, my grandma in physical way, she gave me, she and my dad gave me all the strength to be tough and be doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I just
That's a great memory. That's a story.
that's
Thanks,
the
Grandma.
story.
Thanks, Grandma.
Yeah, thanks grandma, and thanks dad, and thanks grandma, thanks Casimira, um, and yeah, I really wanted to thank you for being here and invite you all to listen to our podcast and to pay attention to what's coming up. And we invite you to follow If Not As Then Who, to follow our channel here in Spotify. And already, thank you.
Naya would say so.
I want to sing a song that reminds me of my grandmothers. And it's about the courage of my people, the courage of my family, and it's in the Pachoha language. Anam petai kamayura kapeton. Anam petai kamayura. Anam petai kamayura kapeton. Anam petai kamayura. Anam pashisha suniata kana pinakinha. Anam pashisha suniata. Anam peto ikamayura. Anam peto ikamayura. Warine Mayo, Parimari, Mayo. This is the way I want to end. Already. Thank you.